Hey Liz, thanks so much for choosing to do a solar return reading with me today. And I'm really glad that Sabrina really liked hers and wanted to recommend me. So I'm sorry that this is getting to you late. I normally do this with like a 24-hour turnaround, but the weekend has been, not even the weekend yet. See, this is what I mean. But the past couple days have been crazy. So things have settled down enough to where I can do this. So because it just took such a long time to edit it and stuff too. So it's a lot. Anyways, so what I want to go ahead and get into today is your solar return for 2020. I'm assuming that's when you want since your birthday just passed. So happy belated birthday. So what I'll do is same with Sabrina. I will go through the natal chart super duper quick just to get an idea of where you're coming from your birth energy, the solar return, and we'll get a sense of what the year is going to look like, and just how things are going to play out. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so this is your natal. Here is your solar return, but let's go ahead and start with the natal. Okay, so I'm just moving this over here. Okay, so you have quite a strong chart with a southern hemisphere chart. So a lot of your energy is external out into the world. And I believe with Sabrina, hers was more of a northern hemisphere where she had a lot of planets here at the bottom. So that energy works quite differently. So a lot of your planetary energy, the way that it's expressed and the way that it develops is by going out there in the world and interacting with the world. So the purpose is to, develop yourself as a part of the tapestry of everybody else, right? And so it's more like, how are you interwoven in the grand scheme? Like, that's your birth energy, how it works. Whereas someone with the inversion of that is, well, how am I special? Let's like take a microscope and look at me and like, let's get really introspective. So all this energy outwards is definitely showing that being out in the world is going to be more comfortable for you than if your solar return chart has a lot of planets at the northern hemisphere. That's going to sort of relay is going to feel a little different. So you also have quite a lot of planets here in this this third quadrant cluster, which is like it's like intimate external relationships. So the first quadrant here is like the relationship with yourself. The second quadrant is like your localized relationships. So like your family, your coworkers, things like that. And then, the seventh, eighth, and ninth, this third quadrant is like relationships that have no prior, establishment in your life. These are people that you purely meet and somehow develop some sort of acquaintance or some sort of friendship or partnership with them. So this is a very, very strong cluster of energy that you've got going here. So I know that this is very important for you. So if you have a solar return, I forget exactly what the layout is, but I do know you have like sun and moon over here. So, having a lot of planets here in the first is not going to feel that comfortable for the year. You would do much better having similar to your natal chart. So, and yes, I did go with the quadrants. I also people get confused. Yes, this is northern. It's the aerial view of the Earth from the sky, if that makes sense, or it's the Earth view of the sky. So it's definitely inverted. So I just wanted to make that clear that is something to note. Okay, so let's very quickly look. Okay, so you do not have any planets out of bounds, which basically means like once they get a certain ascension away from the Earth, they are harder to control and they're harder to, they don't follow their typical optimal energy, if you will. So you don't have any that are out of bounds. A lot of people will have like one or two, but there are definitely a lot of people that don't have any. So it's not, uncommon to have none, but it's also not uncommon to have one or two. So let's take a look at this graph of your modalities and your elemental energy here. So you have a lot of cardinal energy. You have a fair amount of fixed and you have low mutable. So you're very good at starting things, but sometimes you don't fully follow through with things. But you can definitely stay consistent with something. But your energy tends to start off really, really well and you can sustain it, but then it kind of teeters off and it just kind of kaputs, right? So usually you are somebody that likes to bring someone in from these like, intimate external relationships to kind of help, polish things up for you, right? So you could do a lot of the groundwork. This also, someone that has a lot of cardinal, they don't typically need someone to hold their hand. They do really well being self-sufficient and being self-starters. So you have this energy where you can handle a lot of busy work. You can handle a lot of new tasks and challenges, and you're not super fixed to where you get stuck in a rut. So a lot of cardinal energy can be good. It's just that sometimes people with a lot of cardinal energy are always looking to start the next thing, and that it can be hard for them to stick with something. So for elemental, you have a huge amount of air. Okay. So we know that you're very, you base a lot of your individuality, a lot of your expression in being objective, being social, learning, and sort of expanding your comprehension of things through interactions with other people. You may be more like science-y based or more like, you might lean more towards like debate or things like that because air really loves to be challenged. They love their mind to be challenged. And air energy also is similar to cardinal energy where they need to flit more. They don't really like to just stay rooted in things. They really need to have some variety, and they can also be pretty versatile. But air energy can also be really flaky. Air energy can also be really indecisive. Air energy can have a hard time being empathetic with other people. So air is, it's a great element to have, but it does, just like everything, everything has its, plus and minuses. Then you also have a fair amount of earth. So it's kind of like you have a lot of this, Libra energy because you have a lot of Libra, and then you also have a lot of this Taurus energy with the earth and the fix. Which is interesting because you are Virgo sun, and Virgo sun is your only mutable. So this is especially telling you that like the sun is something like you really are meant to master in this lifetime, because whenever you have something of this nature where it's pointing out, like it's singled out in some way, it's placed that way for a reason because it's important. So if your sun was at 29 degrees of something, or like I said, it's the only mutable planet you have, and it's such a major planet, the sun, obviously we're going from our moon to the sun. So, your goal is to, be able to move away from just being somebody that's good at starting things and initiating things and then sort of getting like tunnel visioned or getting distracted and, jumping over to the next best thing, and having more of this mutable energy where you can be that person that comes in and can service somebody else, right? Because that's another thing. Like cardinal wants to do everything themselves. Mutable wants to help people. Like they are like, if you think of like a video game, like a World of Warcraft, where you have like your paladins and you have like your mages and your sorcerers and things like that. But then you have like the clerics or the healers. Like that's what mutable signs are. They're like the clerics and the healers. Like they come in and they support other people. So the goal for you in your growth is like learning how to be able to support other people. So reason why I'm saying all this, because I want to see if that energy comes into play in the soul return. If it's placed in a particular way where I can say your son's going to be really challenged this year. But you do have a fair amount of earth, so you can be very resourceful. You can be grounded. So again, same with the fixed, right? Like you can be grounded and resourceful, and you can stick with things. You're not like one of these people who have like a lot of cardinal and a lot of mutable and like no fixed, because that is difficult. But you do have a low amount of fire, low amount of water. Both are low. So again, you have some issues with well, earth and air do require some balancing for sure, because this is earth is feminine, air is masculine, but water and fire, they I find can be like fuel. So people are usually driven by one of two things. They're driven by like motivation and passion, or they're driven by what they feel or their intuition. So when someone lacks water and fire, I find that these people have a very hard time finding not so much the energy, right? The cardinal energy helps you there, but like finding reason or meaning for doing things. And so what when someone has a lack of water and fire, but they have a lot of air, this is like, well, I need for someone to explain to me why I should care. That's kind of how I view that. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it manifests for you, but it would make sense because you have so much Libra, and Libra is so reliant on what other people think and say. Libra is just, they put everybody before themselves. So I'm seeing this here, it wouldn't be surprising if that was the case. And really quick, I didn't do this as much with Sabrina, but I just want to look really quick. Okay, so your sun is actually really well placed. Um, it's there in the seventh, so like you are visible, you draw in a lot of people. You draw in a lot of people that want to support and service you, right? Because the seventh house is like, what do we draw to us, right? So because it's usually some sort of trait that we feel we don't possess, or some sort of trait that we want to sort of pass off to someone else because we don't want to develop it that much. But the sad news is because it's your sun, you kind of don't have a choice. So, but the moon typically stays consistent. The moon is typically, that's just who you are. But the sun, you're trying to grow into that. So you're drawing in a lot of examples of what you would like to ascend to, even if right now it's hard to see it because of all that Libra. So your sun's really well placed, your moon's well placed. You don't get a lot of difficulty here, which let me tell you is a blessing, because people who have hard aspects to their sun and moon, it's very difficult. Rising in Aquarius, so I can understand that you have this sort of collectedness to you, and you could be a little quirky. You may present yourself differently than other people. You're not the type that like to conform, but you are very humanitarian focused. So you care a lot about other people. You care about the rights of other people. You feel like everybody should have a value in life and place and purpose and meaning. And this is a very innovative sign too. And the Saturn here is showing that you may be highly critical of yourself because you want to improve yourself constantly, because you may feel like you may fall into some form of like depression if you feel like you are not helping or creating some sort of foundation for yourself. Therefore, you can help other people. And also Saturn in the first, natives tend to have to grow up very quickly in life. Like usually something happens to where they miss out on some of their childhood. But what's interesting and what I mainly wanted to look at, so you do got some Neptune stuff going on here. And you do have some Uranus stuff going on here. But I'm interested in this Pluto because the Pluto is doing a T-square. So T-square to your Venus and Saturn. So this is interesting. This is a huge dichotomy between the Saturn in Aquarius and the Venus in Leo. So sometimes you may have a hard time balancing when to value yourself, especially yourself within a relationship, and when to value essentials and structure and like your self-improvement, right? Like when do you accept yourself and enjoy the gifts you give to others, and when do you decide that you need to improve because like it's not polished enough, it's not good enough, it's not where you want it to be. So it's kind of interesting to see how the Pluto will play out. But point being, this is a natal chart reading. I just wanted to go over stuff that stuck out to me, things that I felt were important to touch on. So let's jump over to the solar return chart now. Okay, so one thing that I want to go over with this solar return, because I feel that I need to definitely discuss this. So normally I kind of just go around like this, which I'm going to, but I wanted to sort of highlight your sun and moon because this is important. Now, luckily, your moon isn't getting hit hard by anything. So I'm less concerned about the moon, but I did want to talk about the sun just because it is in this opposition to Neptune. Now, before I get into this, I want to preface that your the energy of these planets will get better. Particularly the moon is going to in about 5 months or so, that moon is going to alleviate a little bit, but the sun is going to remain going through that 12th house. These are both 12th house sun and moon in Virgo, and your natal moon is in Libra. Last I checked, just want to be sure. Yeah, so you're very used to your moon being Venus ruled, and now it's Mercury ruled. So this is a huge jump for the moon to go from this cardinal air to this mutable earth. As we mentioned before, you have somewhat of a low mutable energy. So this is not super duper comfortable by sign or the placement by house. Obviously, your sun is the same because it's solar return, so it's going to remain at the same degree. Real quick before I do that, okay, no planets out of bounds, and then here's what's different. So you have low air this year. So meaning that you're going to sort of throw away the objectivity and the need for a lot of social interaction. That's going to kind of go out the window. But you have a lot of earth, and that's partially just because we have this huge stellium in Capricorn that's been happening. But Saturn will eventually go back into Aquarius. Technically, Saturn retrograded back. It just went direct a little bit ago. So it is the start of your Saturn return, basically, once it hits Aquarius again. But you have a lot of earth. And I was telling Sabrina that when someone has a lot of earth in their chart and they're getting close to a Saturn return, this is like, okay, I need to start adulting and I need to start putting my adult hat on and trying to, figure out what it is I'm supposed to be doing. What moves do I need to be making? So I usually see a lot of Saturn stuff happening. I usually see like a lot of stuff happening in like the first house of self-development, a lot of stuff in the 10th of like, well, what career do I actually want to do? You're past college age, so I don't look at the 9th that much, but you do see a lot of stuff in the 7th, like you start thinking about marriage, and 4th house, start thinking about buying a home, things like that. So I wanted to get into, in a sense, what all this energy could mean. But so the point is you're trying to be a lot more resourceful and you're trying to be a lot more collected this year. Like you still have a lot of cardinal energy, but you're throwing away some fixed to get more mutable. So you're trying to be more balanced, right? Like you're trying to be, I guess this year your version of being grounded is balancing out some of this energy and how it's expressed, which is, I would say pretty good. So low air, still have a low amount of water, so you're not, without for that. And I think, yeah, Pluto was your only water placement. So you're going to have a little more intuition than usual, a little more empathy than usual. It might feel a little out of sorts, but you're going to be focusing on the needs of others this year. But you do have one extra point in fire. So you're attempting to definitely make some moves this year. And what this will kind of, just by like the 8th house stuff I see here and the 12th and some of this other stuff I see here, the North Node on the, the midheaven, is that this is going to require like a lot of introspection and a lot of investigating, right? Like you're going to kind of put your investigator hat on this year. So let me get into why I wanted to point out the moon and the sun. So when it comes to the moon, let's start there. So the moon in the 12th means that anything in Virgo is going to be prone to anxiety. So when I see the moon in Virgo, I get a little nervous because my daughter's a Virgo too, and she was supposed to be born on a new moon, right? So she was supposed to have like, 0, and I was like, please don't, because it's not to be offensive to people with moon in Virgo, but that would have been a lot of Virgo energy, and it's a very self-critical moon placement, and it's just the anxiety can be overwhelming sometimes. So when I see this here, this makes me wonder, where this anxiety could come from this year. Now, what's interesting is with COVID, sometimes the moon in the 12th means that you have a sick family member. Typically, a family member is sick and not you. So I don't want to, make you feel a certain way. But this could require like the 12th house also rules like hospitals and like institutions like that. So sometimes like this sun moon here has a call to care for somebody who's sick and not well. Um, but this can also just mean for some reason you feel that you can't express yourself emotionally with other people. The sun and moon here both are basically you saying like, I need to step away from people, right? So you have this chart. Sorry, my nose is itchy. So you have this chart with like all these planets in the seventh and then going into the eighth, but even the eighth house planets are in stellium with, these other planets here. So, I mean, it's a wide stellium, but I still count it. So you have so much focus typically in the seventh and like other people. And so, today when I'm looking at this, I'm just like, okay, like she's taking a major break from people. So what kind of happened in the previous solar return year to where now all of a sudden we need to put it on hold, right? And it's interesting because Chiron in Aries is in the seventh too. So this is like, there you may have been neglecting yourself, right? So now you're like, I need rest. So you may be very tired this year. People might wonder even like where you are, like where you've been. Now it could be COVID related, like you're still in some sort of position of lockdown, like especially if you're working from home where like people just don't see you as much. But it could be like purposeful too, where you're just like, I don't really want to go out as much. Like there could be this sense of like anxiety of you putting yourself in those relationships that you're typically very comfortable in. Now, like I said, because you're only getting a nice, sorry, because you're getting a nice trine from Uranus, like you will occasionally get that like blitz of energy where like Taurus wants to go out and have fun, right? So you may get this like blitz of energy with someone you're familiar with, like, okay, yeah, I'll go out, or like, yeah, I'll expose myself a little bit, right? There may be a particular one or two particular people that you feel comfortable enough to share your feelings with, but for the most part, to everybody else, you're going to kind of just be doing your own thing this year. Um, and because the sun is so close to the ascendant with this solar return, again, this goes back to that natal chart placement I was talking about with that Saturn, right? The Saturn in the first is like, I need to figure out how to develop myself because lately, the way that life has been going, I feel like I need to make some changes in order to like exist in the world in a way that I feel more aligns with what I want in life. So it's interesting because you're just going to be taking a lot of rest and you're going to be wanting a lot of privacy, but you're also going to be like trying to do a lot of development of yourself. And again, when the sun's in the first, although it's typically a very visual placement, in solar return readings, it's different. It's not as much that meaning as it is when you're looking up natal chart meetings. So um, the sun being in, the sun being right close to the ascendant is saying like, this is a private year for me and I'm doing a lot of improvement and not any a lot of people may not even see what these improvements are, right? They really are kind of just for you. Um, Now, even though you might have like you might be naturally anxious this year, or just prone to just the blues, right? Like just not wanting to go out, just not wanting to do anything. The Mercury here in Libra is like you're still gonna have that same diplomatic nature where like you don't want to worry anybody, you don't want to burden anybody. So the Mercury here is just going to kind of be like, oh, everything's fine, I'm good, and how about you, right? It's like it always goes back to the other person, even though it's in the first. Those conversations will be helpful though to kind of help with some of this energy because you do need some sense of normalcy, and so that the Mercury this year is going to give you that. So that is something to to know. Oh, sorry. Okay, so sorry, I had to take a phone call quick, so I had to pause it. Okay, so one thing interesting is I was talking about this Mercury being in Libra, right? So in some ways, any planet that falls in the first is kind of up for scrutiny, especially if like Saturn is involved or like Jupiter or Pluto. These planets being involved with this Mercury is going to sort of require some scrutiny, but especially Mercury in the first can be you evaluating the way you converse with other people, the way you comprehend things, um, your intellectual ability, but it does also quantify the way in which you will talk to different people. What is the general consensus? Which is you're going to continue to, your Mercury will continue to interact the way it usually does. And it's very much focused in the first, right? So you may in some ways be battling with, well, how do I keep up this year? Because again, this is that cardinal energy. You are losing a little bit of that energy. But it's also air, and this is your only air placement for this year. So your Mercury is so used to, being a well-oiled machine with all these other planets, right? And now it's kind of here by its lonesome in the first with no other planets, and it's not getting any help from anybody. So this can be that you feel burdened with a lot of work, like literal, like busy work or paperwork, or this could be that you just feel bridled with a lot of, I guess what you could say is like consensual or voluntary like responsibility to other people. To be honest, your chart this year, there's a lot of indicators of you stepping up and being responsible for another person. So at first, when I was looking at the sun and moon, I was kind of saying, well, you're definitely trying to take some time to yourself, and you do care about the needs of other people, but you really wanting your privacy. But once I started looking at the aspects from here in the fourth, and the moon in the 12th does indicate usually a sick and ailing family member, the Saturn Pluto does too. So the Mercury squaring these can be, again, you having to be responsible and like, in a sense, providing some of that daily routine for somebody else with this squaring to the fourth. Now, this is all just possibilities, right? Like I can't say for sure if you have an ailing family member or not, because this is a solar return is like your emotional perception of what happens during the year. So, and this is your disposition, but certain placements do indicate certain things happening. So it's especially just by house placement. So the Mercury could get stressed, right? And the Mercury gets a little flighty and nervous when it's got a lot on top of it. And so the Jupiter and Pluto are really going to address dynamics. Specifically, Pluto square Mercury is going to be talking a lot about power dynamics. It's going to be talking a lot about the interactions you have with those close to you, particularly family members or people residing in your home. Pluto in the fourth also typically indicates some sort of major move. So this could be that you are moving out of your parents' home or out of a dormitory or something, and getting your own apartment for the first time. We do have, this is a lot of Capricorn right here. So that is possible that you are moving out on your own and you'll have roommates. That's what I'm looking at here. Or this could be that you are relinquishing this independence, right? Like this independence of maybe you were living somewhere and had a roommate and you're moving back home to care for someone that's ailing or sick. So one thing I do see here though is that there's just going to be a lot of opposition this year and a lot of people challenging your thoughts, your studies in general, and like your beliefs. And Jupiter, the thing I want to warn you of is that in some ways, because you are so focused on other people, in general, like your general personality is that you want to be somebody that can step in and help others and initiate things for others and be a leader and, be someone that is a very integral part in people's lives. Even though that is your typical disposition, the fact is that while it may look simple, right, with the Jupiter, there's a lot. This is not an easy thing to go through, if that makes sense. So you're going to have to sort of deal with a lot of the challenges in the home this year. Additionally, because of COVID, I do see the moon in the 12th, the Neptune in the 6th, and this stellium squaring Mercury in the first. This could just be honestly the whole working from home, and that might be very stressful and very isolating. And that would make sense because Neptune in the 6th in Pisces could be like you literally don't go to the workplace anymore. So like this, like the workplace is sort of ill-defined, right? Like there's no real solid interaction happening with work. A lot of it is now being isolated and away from like an actual location. So I find this interesting that you have this square going on from Mars and to the stellium and Mercury. There is no T square here, so the Mars and the Mercury are not in opposition, which is great because that just causes more issues. But there could just be a lot that's being challenged, and your resolve to be able to handle these things will definitely be tested. This could just be a very tiring year in general because Mars in the 8th can sometimes get its energy drained, especially if it's not in Scorpio. But it isn't a strong sign. It's just a lot of what motivates you, a lot of your efforts, although you want to work on the self-improvement, a lot of things, your energy is going to be going to other people, which is funny because you wanted to kind of take a year, looks like, to sort of rest. And it's like, I don't see a lot of indicators outside of these showing me that that's going to be a reality. So, and what's interesting as well with the 4th, so Pluto usually indicates like the major move, and then Jupiter and Saturn both will want to try to like renovate in some way or like change the actual living environment. So if you don't move, this could be that you get new roommates, right? If you're living in an apartment, or let's say you have a partner and they move in. This could be that you guys don't see as eye to eye as you thought you would. Like the Jupiter may come into play and be like, yeah, this will be great to move in together. And then it happens and you're like, this is not what I signed up for. This is not a great trade deal, if you will. But because you have these trines going from the sun to the Pluto Saturn specifically, a lot of this 4th house stuff happening this year it is a point of challenge and growth for that sun. So you'll move even more further away from your moon in Libra to the sun in Virgo. So that is like the purpose of what's happening. And this is made even more clear by the nodes, right? The node being like the south node being on the 4th. So like karmically, to help the year move a little smoother, sort of start addressing that south node energy, which is ruling the 4th here. And then you'll be able to unlock this like external world again. Because it's like, even though you have planets here in the southern hemisphere, like all your personal planets are here, these outer planets are really challenging you, especially Saturn, South Node. These are karma placements, right? So karmically, like you're being challenged. And your poor little Mercury is down here too. Like, he's got to take all the brunt of the work. So this is also challenging if you have issues with being a doormat, if you have it, because this is a Mercury Libra thing, right? Like if you have issues of just wanting to appease people and being a yes man, this year is challenging that. So this is the main antithesis of what I wanted to talk about with your solar return, because this is what I'm seeing. I also forgot to mention that we could technically count. I would say it's hard to say what house what quadrant has an emphasis, because technically they all do, but I would say if any, it's this like fourth quadrant here, which is like um, this worldly placement, like culture, which is interesting because that does seem to be a dichotomy from all the stuff happening in the fourth. So you could argue it's one of a few of these. So yeah, just a lot of stuff going on in the fourth. A lot of Capricorn, Virgo energy happening this year. So again, you're really gonna have to throw away a lot of that your familiarity with the Libra energy because it will not benefit you this year like it has in the past. That's not to say lose yourself and lose who you are, but it's definitely saying that you have to be cognizant that what you have done in the past isn't going to hold water like it has previously. Okay, so let's talk about Neptune in the sixth for a minute. So Neptune is pretty strong because it is in Pisces, but again, this is a generational placement right now. So while it is strong, the Neptune, it's not so much the sign that matters as much with like Pluto and Neptune just because, they move so slow. So we talked about how Sun is opposite of Neptune, and Neptune in the sixth can mean like the workplace is like there's no definition there, right? And so this was one of my reasonings of you could be working from home because of COVID. But let's get a little deeper as to what that actually means. So Neptune in the sixth can mean where you are working a job, like your day-to-day job, not like your career. Although the North Node on the 10th, this is interesting. So this could be that you have chosen a job or a career where you're no longer happy. Either you got it just for the essential of needing a paycheck, or you thought that this was a good field for you and it's not, which wouldn't be surprising with the Jupiter square Mercury, right? Like you made a decision based on the practical facts, right? Like because that's what air people do. Like, oh, this looks great on paper, but then you actually get into it and you're like, I don't like this. So this can be working a job where just simply your heart's not in it. You're not satisfied. It can also mean, again, like I said, because there's little definition. Anything with Neptune involved or the 12th house can be like, I was explaining to my husband the other night because I read this from an astrologer and it makes so much sense. Anything that gets afflicted by Neptune or the 12th house is like automation, right? So where basically like you go on autopilot almost because there is no definition. Like there's also no definition in your purpose or what the meaning is, what the direction is. So you kind of can just go on autopilot and just like, I'm just going to do this and hope that hope that something pans out, right? But Neptune in the sixth can also mean transitioning between jobs, where again, we talked about the fourth house implications of you possibly moving or, someone moving in with you. Regardless of the circumstance, this may require you to have to move from one job to another. So, but I would sooner think that it's part of your job has been eliminated from a specific location and working from home just because of all the fourth house stuff. But yeah, you're just not, you could find yourself displaced mentally and physically from your job. Like the two are not coinciding together. It doesn't look like Neptune's really going to transition out of the sixth for this solar return year. So this effect is going to remain for the entirety of the solar return year. Whereas what I was talking about with the moon, for example, the moon in which technically it's already been like a month, a little over a month. So in about 4 months, that moon is going to move into the 11th, and then things are going to feel like a lot better once the moon is in the 11th. But right now, with it being in the 12th, that's also leading me to assume that a lot of this fourth house stuff is happening like right at the beginning of your solar return year. So, once that moon moves into 11th, it'll feel better. But, until then, that does lead me to question about like Neptune and what is the real catalyst for all this energy. But you find yourself needing more job fulfillment. So you may find yourself looking for new jobs. Now, again, you have to be careful because you're going to have to go with a job that feels really good. You're gonna have to go with your intuition. So if you don't trust your intuition enough, go to an astrologer or tarot reader or something or a psychic and just be like, hey, I'm kind of in between these different jobs. Can you tell me which one? You know, it will help to trust your own intuition because it's in the sixth house. You'll have a good intuition of which job would be right for you, but it can't hurt because your Mercury may want to like try to overrule this and will try to just go with the job that looks the best on paper. So you have to again be a little careful with that. Um, um, let's see. But also you may question your abilities, right? Like you may question like if you are even equipped to work in this particular job. Um, but if you are, happy with your job, right? The sixth house also rules like your health and routine. So it could be that you have confusion or uncertainty about your health during this time. Um, Now, when this happens with Neptune in the sixth, it can be things that are difficult to diagnose. So I'm really hoping this is not the case. I'm really hoping that it is a workplace thing because if not, then you may find yourself going to the doctor quite a bit to try to figure out what is, causing you to not feel well. But this can also be in relation to, we talked about the sun, Neptune opposition, the moon, and these planets in the fourth indicating that someone could be ailing. That could be what the Neptune is too, is that they are sick with something that is hard to diagnose. And it is trining these planets down here. So I could see that being a relation. But I would sooner think it has to do with the sun, right? Because the sun in the 12th, but close to the ascendant is about like that self-improvement, taking some time to really evaluate what it is you want, what direction you want to go in, because the sun also is associated with like direction. So like, I think this is what it's more dealing with. But you may just also find that you're highly sensitive this year, like energetically. You could be sensitive to other people's energy. Like you may be um more empathic this year. And if you're someone that's not empathic, like you can be empathetic or sympathetic with Libra, but to be like an empath is like totally different thing. And it can feel really disorienting for someone who doesn't naturally have that disposition. So yeah, you may find yourself picking up on energy from other people even. Um, but let me see. I'm trying to think of anything else that I'll need to touch on with that. It just could be general stress too, but not knowing where stress is coming from. It could be that your routine, like if you're taking care of somebody else, or if you're focusing a lot on like your house, like redecorating your house or um, keep making your house more sustainable. This also could mean that like your routine, like you never know like what's gonna happen each day. You could get called to do anything at any time. So these could be really from all different purposes. If you're caring for someone sick, it could be that. If it's a job thing, it could be that. If it's like I never know what my energy is going to be, like sun opposition Neptune. Like I never know if I'm going to be really tired when I wake up today or if I'm going to be energetic. And I want to be like really, really productive because the sun in Virgo, like on the ascendant, wants to be super productive. So you may get frustrated with yourself, right? The Mercury, you may get frustrated with yourself because you're like, I want this to be pleasant because that's another Libra word. Like I want this to be pleasant, like this work that I do, this learning. I love learning. I love, improving myself. I love being social with other people, but I'm so freaking tired this year. So, there's a lot of patterns that like keep repeating themselves, but it's important that I walk you through my thought process so that you understand how I arrived to the conclusions I arrived to. So, okay, and let's talk about Mars really quick in the eighth. So, we're kind of skipping the seventh. So, let me just go over the seventh, right? So, as I mentioned, I know a lot of people, especially around our age, are starting to think a lot about marriage, are starting to think a lot about relationships. So if you are with somebody, I don't want you to feel like your relationship is not important. Just don't be surprised if your relationship takes a little bit of a backseat this year, just because there really isn't a lot going on. And I don't typically read Chiron for soul returns, but the Chiron in the seventh struck me as interesting. So this could be a recent severing of a relationship, or this could be like, I'm really just not prepared to be in a relationship right now. Like, it's just, I can't handle it, which is totally fine, totally valid. But, we do have, the seventh house, which is relationships with intimate relationships, one-on-one relationships. So this is not just marital partners. This is your partnerships or your really close friends that feel almost like family. Like, that is a seventh or a third house placement. But just anyone that you have like an intimate relationship with where you talk to them one-on-one without other people being in the mix. So, or you can, even if typically you always talk to them within a social circle, like you know them well enough to where you could answer like trivia questions about them, things like that. So it is being ruled by Pisces, and the classical ruler of Pisces is Jupiter, and then the modern ruler is Neptune here in the sixth. So again, this is kind of showing like if we use Neptune, that the relationship is ill-defined and that the relationship is taking a backseat to work issues, or the relationship is taking a lot of work, but it feels like it's not really going anywhere for the year. Or if we're using this Jupiter, which I would sooner use, this is, I focus on the relationship's essentials and make sure that the relationship remains healthy, but I have to let my partner understand that there are other things about my life that are taking precedence right now, and if they want to be with me, they'll understand that. But that Pisces nature will still kick in and want to comfort and want to be close to their partner. So if you are in a relationship, like, I don't want you to feel like your relationship is like doomed or something because there's nothing here. Because we could pretend the Chiron's not there. But, if you're not in a relationship, then I would say this is not the year where like a major, major relationship or like finding the one is going to happen. If it does, then it's going to be something with this transit Jupiter that's happening to do that. So I would say whenever like Venus comes to hit Jupiter, to hit the stellium, maybe that's when it would happen, right? But like otherwise, it would be, or when the Jupiter won't hit your Saturn. Jupiter may hit your ascendant. I have to look by the time of your next solar return. But we could look at, if you ever want to, we can look at 2021 if you're interested in things like that. Anyways, that's what I have to say about the seventh. Not a whole lot there. Now, what's interesting is that you had a birthday recently where Mars had just gone retrograde. So Mars retrograde in the solar return is important. So what this is calling you to do is to sort of and because it's in the eighth, again, this is what I meant about like when I was saying, oh, you're gonna have to put like your investigative hat on this year. That's what that was referring to, because this is going to be a process of you delineating motivation in all things. When Mars is retrograde, it is very, very hard for you to be motivated to do much of anything. I think a lot of the motivation is going to come from that sun just repeatedly being challenged, or like this Venus coming into play in the 11th. So it may be that you have some social groups that will help, get you in a place where you feel like you're able to take on things more, because I'm looking at the fire elements, right? So Mars is already here, but it's retrograde. So that's unfortunate, right? So you could almost act like this, if we're using fire as like passion or a motivator, you could almost take this back down to one because that Mars is retrograde and it's in the eighth. It's unfortunate. But again, this is I feel really fatigued and tired aspect as well. So your goal is, the reason why it's in the eighth, right, is because you are trying not to be counterproductive. Again, productive is a Virgo word. So like you want above all things to be productive. So the retrograde Mars in the eighth is that you're going to be trying to find what does motivate you in life, like what gives you drive, because you sort of lack that natally. So like you have to sort of research yourself and find a way to figure out what those motivators are. And it's also going to be associating how you handle anger or frustration, which, because it's in the eighth, this to me tells me that you're going to try to like bottle up any frustration. And so I have to warn you of that. And, that's my job, is that you'll need to find an outlet for that anger, because if you don't, it's going to blow up. And because that Mars is hitting that fourth house, that's where it's going to blow up, is in the home life situation. So if you are caring for someone sick, or if you have a roommate, right? Because the Mercury already, like, people are already going to be challenging you. You're already going to have challenging dynamics with people. But then on top of that, like, if you're not handling that outlet, if you're not finding an outlet for that anger and frustration in a healthy way, you're going to blow up on them too. And that Pluto is sort of like, in a way, that's sort of what that Pluto wants, right? It wants to challenge you, but Pluto's just happy to get a reaction, right? Because Pluto wants to transform people, but you have to be conscious of, okay, like, but I also care about the long-term transformation, and I don't want to create a situation where presently I am losing my, what. So, so yeah, you need to figure out when it's appropriate to be angry, and when it's not going to service you. You may be quick to bow down to other people's demands. And again, that's probably typical for you because you're already got a lot of Libra, and that's something Libra people have to work on. But you may definitely, this year will be a good year to assess elements of yourself where you self-sabotage yourself, right? Because we're talking about the eighth house, and the eighth house deals a lot with like our mental health, or like deeply embedded behaviors that are kind of secretive. Like, it's not things that we outright say to other people, but if someone knows us intimately enough, like the eighth house is also like what's behind closed doors of a marriage. So like a lot of your eighth house stuff comes out when you're married to somebody. So, but just anyone who is going to have enough of a proximity to you to be like in a private place with you alone, like this sort of Mars energy could come out. So like you may be the type that is not going to want to defend yourself, and you may do things that are self-sabotaging to yourself. So you may be taking some time to reflect on what those things are and how you can improve them, because you obviously don't want to self-sabotage yourself every turn that you make. And I'm not trying to make the solar return year sound like it's horrible, but it's just there are some solar returns that are really, really great and have a lot of great stuff in them. And then there's ones like this that sometimes are a little difficult. But I do need to stress that this is a year for major, major growth. And the years where you have the most growth are typically the years that were the most challenging. So I want to make that very clear. So let's go ahead and look to, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to touch on with the Mars Aries before we get into Uranus. Okay, so let's talk about Uranus. So because it's in Taurus, I'm going to assume that primarily Uranus in the eighth is dealing with finances. And a lot of that makes sense because there does seem to be some implications with jobs. I forgot to mention that Pluto, Saturn, I know Saturn's not technically squaring this Mercury, but this could be demanding demands from your boss as well, this Mercury square thing happening here. And you may bring some of that stress home. But with this Neptune sort of not, making the sixth house difficult, it is definitely possible that this Uranus is dealing with finances. Now, and it's square Venus too. So this is another money planet, right? So there is something about your personal finances, right? Because, when you're looking at Leo, this is usually yourself because it's associated with the sun, or like family finances is being triggered by this Uranus in the eighth. And then you're getting a nice trine from the moon but this is an exact square, so this is interesting. So it could be that some of your finances are going to have to be funneled into other things. So some of your personal resources may have to become resources for others. This could also be some kind of inheritance, but the financial implications of Uranus in the eighth are sudden, right? These are like sudden onset financial issues or gains. Now, as much as I don't want to say this, this is rare. Sometimes this could be that you earn an inheritance through a death in the family, which honest to goodness, I hope that's never, ever, ever the case because that is horrible. But that is a possibility here. Like I said, I hope that's not the case, but it could also be that, let's say you are switching jobs. Let's say the Neptune in the sixth is part of that. It could be, you know, at that point, the resource is the jobs, right? The job is giving the resource to you, the money. So it could be like a sudden stop or sudden drain because literally you're in between jobs, and that you'll go from having like not a lot of money to all of a sudden like having like a lump sum of a lot of money because you're working again. This could also mean that you incurred debts this year, or it means that you can pay off debts this year. The moon being trine to the Uranus is making me question if your motivation is positive. Like at the beginning of the year, as of right now, you have an understanding of the financial issues and that your goal is to want to pay off debts. But the Venus squaring the Uranus is making it difficult because you have a small amount of what you can put towards those debts and you would like to have more, but the Saturn is kind of restricting it as well. Like there's just, the Saturn Pluto down here, because I look at Pluto too for like eighth house. So you're being restricted. Like you have to be very with Capricorn, it's all about the essentials, right? So it's like I have to focus on what's essential, and I know paying off debt is something I should be doing, but paying a lot towards my debt it's not a necessity. It's something that like I would prefer to do this. So it could be student loans. It could be, especially with COVID, like some people have put freezes on bills, and maybe all of a sudden, like all at once, those bills freezes will lift and then your bills will go up for the month. So there's a lot of different implications of what that could be, but that Mars could be associated as well. I think less so, but it could be associated well with like, well, my spending habits, right? Like how do I self-sabotage myself as far as my spending? Alternatively, if I saw a lot of seventh house stuff, I would address this more, but I don't. So basically, Uranus Taurus in the 10th could be like changing sexual needs as well. Again, we talked about how your physical energy, your physical body, like a lot of this stuff may just sort of change this year. But the Uranus here is sort of a call to like you may all of a sudden not have a lot of sexual needs and you normally do. It could be that you don't have a partner and you've been cool with it, but then all of a sudden you're like, I really need physical connection and I really need that intimacy with someone. And it feels very sudden, right? And it feels a little uncomfortable, right? Because in the eighth, so like if you don't address planets that are in the eighth, it feels very, very uncomfortable when they stay in that position, but they're unaddressed. So I'd be interested to hear from you as far as what feels true as far as that. We did talk about North Node up in the 10th. Not much going on in the 9th or the 10th. Also, first, the sun being, on the first 12th, that likely means that the sun is going to be, typically it goes up into the 10th, but because it's in the 12th, I'm trying to remember the cycle of the sun and where it goes. But point being is like your achievements this year are going to mainly be personal, but the North Node on the 10th is a call to say like, after this year, chances are you're going to have more of a presence in this area. So if you can sort of handle this year appropriately, that will give you a certain skill set that will help you with this adaptability, because it's a mutable sign, right? And you have low mutability in your natal chart. So, and this Mercury right here too, like Mercury on the 10th is great. Like every employer wants somebody who can be quick, can be innovative, works really, really fast, can handle a lot of tasks at once, can multitask. So you'd be building this skill, right? Like you would be building this up so that like it is a sort of permanent skill you take with you into your career. So if you want a benefit of this year, that's it. So really quick, we'll go into Venus in Leo in the 11th. So even though this Venus does have a pretty hard square to Uranus, this doesn't have to be an all bad placement. For one, when Venus does get into the 11th of the soul return house, this is actually better if you're not in a relationship, or like if relationships aren't a huge deal to you, because Venus in the 11th can create, it's very hard to explain, but see this placement as like almost like a sign that's like above your head, that's like, hey, I'm notice me, I'm available. Even if you're not available, it's like the planet, like the energy of the planets is like making you appear very desirable, and that's both platonically and romantically. So also Leo itself does have an element of romance just as a sign. So these two combined sort of can give off this, sensual, sexual sort of nature, right? With when you're in these friendship groups. But I will say any sort of interactions you have socially will likely be within groups instead of individually. Also, a lot of your individual dynamics will be happening with very, very close, like long established relationships. So again, things like unless you've been dating some guy for like 10 years, chances are it's not that. And also, sorry for the assumption of guy, because to be honest, I don't know. Um, but another thing I found interesting is because there's a trine here to the moon and the sun's here in the 12th, this could be that this group of like where you find some pleasure, some like relief, because this Venus is really important. The Venus is going to help you through the year, right? To be able to like sort of deviate from some of the stress you have to focus on the Venus. This could be like an online group. This could be like an online forum, or like a private group on Facebook, or like I guess I don't use WhatsApp, but maybe like a group on WhatsApp or Discord or something. Like this could be like some kind of group like that where like it's online, because the reason I'm saying online is because of the Uranus here plus both of these planets in the 12th. I just get the feeling that you're not going to have a lot of social interactions where you're going out with a group of people. Like I get the sense that either this is like a community meeting sort of thing, or like you join a support group, or it's like a group that's online of like people who have similar interests. So that would be something good to do if you haven't done it, because it will help you. But Uranus Venus square 11th 8th is very, very interesting. So this could be, like I said, the 8th house does deal with sexuality. This could be that you're attracted to somebody that you wouldn't normally be attracted to. Um, Now this can be minor. This could be like, every guy I've dated or every person I've dated previously had blonde hair and light eyes. And now I'm with someone with really dark brown skin, brown hair, and brown eyes. It could be something like that, right? It could just be like you're attracted to somebody completely different, out of the norm. For instance, in my husband's soul return, the year he met me and the year he married me, we got married very quickly, which Uranus in the 7th. But we've been happily married now for years. So, but, his previous wife was this wafy, pale, like light-haired, blue-eyed girl. And then he met me, and I couldn't be any more opposite. But that's what happens when Uranus falls into some sort of like relationship aspect. So this could be just you being attracted to somebody who's out of the norm. This could be literally like a stigmatized out of the norm, which again, I don't know much outside the basis of your chart. I mean, I could look. Okay, I don't know why. This is being annoying. Okay. I mean, Maybe. I mean, like it's so hard. Like, they say with astrology, it's so hard to tell that. I've read a lot of different people researching the aspects, but I still haven't found anything that could give that kind of basis just based off a birth chart. I do know some aspects are pretty common for that, but that's what that could be. It could be exploring different things. It could also be, again, that if you are in between jobs, that you could, when you get into a stable job again, or when your current job becomes more stable, you will get a slight increase of money, but it'll stay there. So there's not a whole lot of room. To be honest, Venus in the 11th sometimes indicates some kind of raise or like an increase of money. But that will be offset towards paying debt. So it'll kind of be like you're making the same, but you'll feel more comfortable from that because it's helping the moon, right? The moon will feel like it's one less thing to worry about. But yeah, I mean, overall, you need the Venus 11th, so you need to find a group or like a group of friends, your social circle, where you can try to do things with them as much as possible, because that is a way of release for you, and it's a way of expression, right? You need to be able to express yourself this year because you are keeping your cards so close to the chest. So I think once that moon moves, I think it's like February of next year, I think, when that moon moves into the 11th, I think that's when that's really going to start happening, right? But until then, and you're lucky because the moon may not have moved there at all, right? It would have to have been back at like 14 degrees, I believe, for it to remain in the 12th. So the fact that it's going to have this chance to move into the 11th is really good. I think I've got everything because I did a lot of aspects. I pretty much covered everything. So the only thing I do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to overlay this on your natal chart and let's see if there's anything. I don't point out everything. I just point out things that look like specifically really important. Okay, so here is this is the solar on the outer. This is the natal on the inner, which I'm sure you know. You're like, yeah, okay, I get it. An interesting look, because you know how I said in the solar return the north node was on the MC, and that I said if you address the south node, it'll help the career house. Well, I wasn't even thinking about the fact that it was, literally falling in the career house for you. I just didn't even put two and two together. I was just reading the solar. So that's pretty funny, actually, that it does fall in there. So naturally, we have all this Capricorn stuff is affecting your Capricorn planets here in the 12th. So you do, I didn't point this out in your natal. You do have some intuition. I just think that you question it a lot, right? And I don't think your intuition is reliable with the Uranus there. So you may, and that might be why you question it. So the Jupiter here is going to expand that ability a little bit more. And to be honest, I think that ability would really help you because you have so much Libra. And again, like you just try to be objective and you try to, take things at face value and you try to analyze things. But the truth of the matter is that for Libra people, having strong 12th house planets is really helpful because it can help you read people better. And that's a gift. Same with like you already have Mars in the 8th. You only have Jupiter in the 8th, so you're actually probably pretty good at reading people. I think that'll help. And the Mercury is falling in the 8th. So again, this is sort of that energy of Mercury being challenged, and then it's falling in your natal 8th house as well. This is again important to address and be aware of, is like those how you react and interact with challenging power dynamics. Neptune falling in the first makes a lot of sense because you have a lot of this stuff in the 12th where like I'm still trying to, in a way, find myself. I'm trying to figure out how to be more productive. I'm trying to figure out how to be more adult. So the Neptune falling in the first is kind of like, I'm still exploring this. And I mean, to be honest, you'll be exploring it for a long time. You've probably gotten better with this as Neptune has, gone through, when you were younger, it's probably harder, especially right around adolescent years when it was right there on the ascendant. You're probably like, I have no clue who I am. So I'm just going to do my Libra thing and I'm going to figure out who I am through other people. So the Neptune moving away from the ascendant, moving towards the second is going to be helpful. And in fact, you'll probably enjoy Neptune while it's in the first, because once it gets into the second, that just makes things complicated. But by then you may be married and then it's not as big of a deal. So yeah, the Mars, Uranus falling in a second. So see, this is why I do this, because I try to get a sense of, okay, like what does this actually affect, right? Because I can make inferences off the solar alone, but once I lay it over, then I can really start to get an idea. So I think, yeah, the Mars Uranus is money related. And that's what I thought it was, but I had to sort of walk through all connotations because I didn't want to leave anything else. So yeah, I think there's going to be this focus on money and your money, your spending habits and things. And the fact that, oh, this is actually Black Moon Lilith. I was thinking that was Pallas for a second. Okay. North Node falling in the fourth. Okay. So destiny this year is calling you back home to your origins, or the place of origin, meaning your place of residence. The subterranean, what people don't see. Again, this is what it was also leading me to believe that this the square from Uranus would be like this small raise of money that would help offset some personal debt. Second, it's in the sixth, but it's right on the seventh. So you could be on the precipice of finding someone, a relationship that will be long lasting. So again, this Venus may be both those connotations I mentioned, but I would say if that Venus does come into play, you may not meet this person till closer to the end of the year. Or if you do meet this person, you'll kind of remain friends with them for the most of the year. Because I just don't see a lot of like sustenance for like relationship as far as like a long-term serious relationship. So, but of course, I never like to write anything off because these are only like external implications. So this could be either the attraction to somebody new, and because the Uranus is falling in the personal beliefs and like what you personally value, this may cause you to question whether you could see yourself valuing someone like this as a partner. But I do think this is mainly like this small increase of money if you change a job to where, or just through your job, they give you more pay to where you're like, okay, like I can start working on some of this debt now. Moon in the seventh, your natal moon's in the seventh. So again, even though the moon's in the 12th, it's only getting one trine from Uranus and it's in your natal seventh. So your moon is still pretty comfortable this year, even though the moon will be prone to anxiety more this year than usual. I do think overall it looks pretty good. So, for the most part, that's what I see. I already talked about Mercury. That's what I see that sticks out to me, that looks, like it's relevant. But anyways, let me know what you think, if any of this made sense, if none of it made sense, because usually you start to feel the solar return for each year, like 2 months before that solar return even happens. And then you'll feel the effects of the previous solar return up to 2 months into your new one. So you might still be feeling some of the effects of the last solar return. And you just need to, after this month, you'll start to feel fully the effects of this solar return. So let me know if any of this makes sense. And I appreciate you so much. Thank you. And I will speak to you soon. I hope to hear some feedback. So thanks so much, Liz. Bye.